5. The boy moved quickly around the corner and out of sight of the iron door and the grey cement walls of the jail. At the wall in front of the courthouse he stood for a while and looked back. When he had come, he was afraid, but he felt good in one way because he would see his father. He was bringing him a cake for Christmas. And he wasn't going to let his father know he was grieved. So his father wouldn't be grieved. Now the sun had lost its strength. There were only a few people loafing around the courthouse wall, so the boy sat for a spell. He felt numb and tired. What would he say to his mother? He would tell her that the jailer was mean to visitors but didn't say nothing to the people in jail. He wouldn't tell her about the cake. When he told her his father had said she shouldn't send him again, that he would send word by the visiting preacher, she would say, "You grieved him, child. I told you to be perk so you wouldn't grieve him." Nobody came near where the boy sat or passed on the street in front of the wall. He had forgotten a more important thing, he thought. He hadn't asked his father where sound had come to him on the road when he wasn't mon a pup. That didn't make any difference. But along the road on the way to the jail, before the bull-necked man had ruined everything, the boy had thought his father would begin to think and say if a stray ever followed you and it wasn't near a house, likely somebody's dropped it. So you could fetch it home and keep it for a dog. Wouldn't do no good now, the boy murmured to himself. Even if he found a stray on the way home, his mother would say, "I'm afraid, child. Don't bring it in the cabin. If it's still here when morning comes, you take it down the road and scold it and run so it won't follow you no more. If somebody come looking, you'd be in awful trouble." A great part of the way home the boy walked in darkness. In the big houses he saw beautiful lights and candles in the windows. Several times dogs rushed to the front gates and barked as he passed. But no stray pup came to him along the lonely, empty stretches of road. In the dark he thought of the bull-necked man crumpled on the floor in the cake crumbs, like the strangled bull in the cattle chute, and he walked faster. At one big house the mailbox by the road had a lighted lantern hanging on it. The boy walked on the far side of the road so he wouldn't show in the light. People hangs 'em out when company is coming at night, the boy's father had once told him. When court was over, they would take his father to a road camp or a quarry or a state farm. Would his father send word with the visiting preacher where he had? Would they take his father away to the chain gang for a year or 2 years before he could tell the visiting preacher? How would the boy find him then? If he lived closer to the town, he could watch each day, and when they took his father away in the wagons where convicts were penned up in huge wooden crates, he could follow. The younger children were already in bed when the boy got home. He was glad, for they would have asked a lot of questions that might make his mother feel bad, questions like, is everybody chained up in jail? How long do people stay in jail at one time? The boy's mother did not ask hurtful questions. She asked if the boy got in all right and if it was warm in the jail. The boy told her that the jailer was mean to visitors but that he didn't say nothing to the people in jail. He told her he heard some people singing in the jail. "Sounder ain't come home?" the boy said to his mother after he had talked about the jail. He had looked under the porch and called before he came into the cabin. Now he went out, calling and looking around the whole cabin. He started to light the lantern to look more, but his mother said, "Hang it back, child. Ain't no use to fret yourself. Eat your supper, you must be famished." He said not to come no more, the boy finally said to his mother when he had finished his supper. He said he'll send word by the visiting preacher. He poked up the fire and waited for his mother to ask him if he had been perk and didn't grieve his father, but she didn't. He warmed himself and watched a patch of red glow the size of his hand at the bottom of the stove. He could see the red-faced man lying on the jail floor with blood oozing out of the corners of his mouth. After a long quiet spell the rocker began to squeak, and it made the boy jump, but his mother didn't notice. She began to rock as she picked out walnut kernels. She hummed for a while, and then she began to sing like she was almost whispering for no one to hear but herself. "You gotta walk that lonesome valley, you gotta walk it by yourself, ain't nobody else gonna walk it for you in bed." The pressure of the bed slats through the straw tick felt good against the boy's body. His pillow smelled fresh, and it was smooth and soft. He was tired, but he lay awake for a long time. He thought of the store windows full of so many things. He thought of the beautiful candles and windows. He dreamed his father's hands were chained against the prison bars and he was still standing there with his head down. He dreamed that a wonderful man had come up to him as he was trying to read the store signs aloud and had said, "Child, you want to learn, don't you?" In the morning the boy lay listening to his mother as she opened and closed the stove door. He heard the damper squeak in the stovepipe as she adjusted it. She was singing softly to herself. Then the boy thought he heard another familiar sound, a faint whine on the cabin porch. He listened. No, it couldn't be. Sounder always scratched before he whined, and the scratching was always louder than the whine. Besides, it was now almost 2 months later, and the boy's mother had said he might be back in a week. No, he was not dreaming. He heard it again. He had been sleeping in his shirt to keep warm, so he only had to pull on his overalls as he went. His mother had stopped singing and was listening. There on the cabin porch, on 3 legs, stood the living skeleton of what had been a mighty coonhound. The tail began to wag, and the hide made little ripples back and forth over the ribs. One side of the head and shoulders was reddish-brown and hairless. The acid of the oak leaves had tanned the surface of the wound the color of leather. One front foot angled above the floor. The stud of an A stuck out on one side, and there was no eye on that side, only a dark socket with a splinter of bone showing above it. The dog raised his good ear and whined. His one eye looked up at the lantern and the possum sack where they hung against the wall. The eye looked past the boy and his mother. Where was his master? Poor creature. Poor creature, said the mother and turned away to get him food. The boy felt sick and wanted to cry, but he touched Sounder on the good side of his head. The tail wagged faster, and he licked the boy's hand. The shattered shoulder never grew together enough to carry weight, so the great hunter with the single eye, his head held to one side so he could see, never hopped much farther from the cabin than the spot in the road where he had tried to jump on the wagon with his master. Whether he lay in the sun on the cabin porch or by the side of the road, the one eye was always turned in the direction his master had gone. The boy got used to the way the great dog looked. The stub of ear didn't bother him, and the one eye that looked up at him was warm and questioning. But why couldn't he buck? He wasn't hit in the neck, the boy would say to his mother. He eats all right, his throat ain't scarred. But day after day when the boy snapped his fingers and said Sounder, good Sounder, no excited bark burst from the great throat. When something moved at night, the whine was louder, but it was still just a whine. Before Sounder was shocked, the boy's mother always said, "Get the pan, child, or feed your dog, child." Now she sometimes got the pan herself and took food out to Sounder. The boy noticed that sometimes his mother would stop singing when she put the food pan down at the edge of the porch. Sometimes she would stand and look at the hunting lantern and possum sack where they hung, unused, against the cabin wall. That town and the jail seemed to become more remote and the distance greater as each day passed. If his father hadn't said don't come again, it wouldn't seem so far, the boy thought. Uncertainty made the days of waiting longer too. The boy waited for the visiting preacher to come and bring word of his father. He thought the people for whom his mother washed the soft curtains could certainly write and would write a letter for his mother. But would someone in the jail read it for his father? Perhaps none of the people in jail could read, and the big man with the red face would just tear it up and swear. The visiting preacher might write a letter for the boy's father. But how would it get to the cabin since no mailman passed and there was no mailbox like the boy had seen on the wider road near the town? The boy wanted to go to the town to find out what had happened to his father. His mother always said, "Wait, child, wait." When his mother returned laundry to the big houses, she asked the people to read her the court news from the newspapers. One night she came home with word of the boy's father. It had been read her from the court news. When the younger children had gone to bed, she said to the bay, "Court's over." And then there was one of those long quiet spells that always made the boy feel numb and weak. You won't have to fret for a while about seeing him in jail. He's gone to hard labor. For how long? The boy asked. It won't be as long as it might. Folks has always said he could do 2 months' work in a day. He'll get time off for hard work and good behavior. The court news had about good behavior in it. The judge said it. Was he gonna be at? The boy asked after he had swallowed the great lump that filled up his throat and choked him. Didn't say. The people that has a paper says it don't ever say where they gonna be at. But it's the county or the state. Ain't never outside the state, the people says. He'll send word, the boy said.